but unfortunately it's a bad throat day for me. But what I'm going to talk about for the next 20 minutes is going to be an introduction to the Android Wear platform that we have. It's not going to be very technical. It's going to be around how the thought process has been and some of the decks, some of the material that we've actually been sharing across. So quickly moving on. Well, that's my intro. I'm a program manager at the developer relations team at Google. So I manage the Google Developer Groups, Google Developer Experts program. I was a Google Developer Expert for Android earlier, and I was very active in the organizing the developer community in Bangalore and the country. A lot of places we've been helping out with it. I worked previously with companies like IBM, Philips. Mostly as an architect, I used to head the Android platform development team. I was mostly an OS guy, so I'm not the app guy. I'm mostly on the OS part of things. But yeah, right now I handle developer relations. As of an agenda today, I'm going to skip the quick introduction to Google Communities. Basically, I'm going to do an introduction to Wear and some of the properties that you guys want to think when you're actually building for Wear, or when you're actually thinking of that use case. So, this is our classic information or the classic deck that we are always shared. How many of you have actually had an experience similar to this? Very few. But I'll tell you an experience which maybe you guys will relate to. You guys are in an elevator, 3 people come. I used to live in an apartment, by the way, when I was growing up. And 10 or 15 years back, when smartphones weren't giving us all that, or there weren't smartphones which were giving us all that data, information overload. When you were at the lift lobby waiting for the lift to come and somebody comes by, you either look at them and smile. And today, if you look at it, the first reaction is pull out your phone and you just check your notifications. You see that happening today evening when you go back, you see that happening. That's a general tendency everybody has. You just want to consume something, there's no call that came, no notification that came, but when you're at the lift lobby, you'll notice people looking at their smartphones, looking at the notifications that they already read, or just opening up Facebook and seeing if there's a new post that came. Sometimes the technologies that we use to save time also takes time away from us. And that's the smartphone or our current ecosystem is kind of a good example for some of these. If you don't use it very carefully, it's more of a drain of your resources rather than augmenting to the time factor that you have. This is what our world or the wearables world that we think should be like. You have information, quickly, you can consume, act on it as quickly as possible so that you have time for the things that matter. Talk to your friends, enjoy the moment that you're in, or maybe spend time with family, or have time to read that book that you always wanted to, but not having to swipe through notification, pull out your phone, punch in a password. And you would be amazed if you kind of count the number of times you pull your phone and then punch in a password and then get some information out of that. This is a question I think I really want to ask many of you guys. How many would you like one more hour a day? If there is somebody who's not raising their hands, I think they're going to be lying at this. I really want 5 more, to be honest. If I could get 5, I would love that. But this is something that you already have. The number of times you open your phone, pull out your phone from your pocket or from your purse, punch in your password. Most of us have so much of data on it that we have a password protected device. It becomes mandatory to do that. It nearly has our entire life there, your bank accounts, your social history, your emails, your Twitter accounts. Really, somebody taking your phone and accessing everything can sabotage your life. So the number of times somebody pulls out a phone, punches their password in, navigates to the application, gets the information, is so high. That's about 10 to 15 seconds before somebody gets to that point, and then get lost in that phone. That's what really happens. You go look for a missed call, then you see one tweet, then you go after the tweet, then you go to the link that, open a browser, go to that link, found an interesting article after that. That happens more often than you can actually think of. And that is what that real life track of a current phone cycle is like. You are living your life, suddenly you get notification or a urge to look at the phone, like the lift lobby thing that I mentioned. You take that, then you punch in your password, all that thing, that's the red part, and then you get lost in the phone. So you really spend a lot more time than you think. And there is research that Google had I don't remember the exact numbers, but they were astonishing. The amount of time you could save if you were not doing all of this and getting to the information directly is so much that this 1 hour you're talking about in a day, you can save at that point itself. You can just think of it. You can just take that scenario and run it by you. Every time you get a mail, you take your phone, unlock it, see it. So life cycle we want from wearable is more like this. You are connected to your device. You get information that is glanceable. You can act on it quickly, but you don't really have to take a phone out, find that password, all that scenario that I talked about. You don't need to do any of these things. Information should augment your life rather than actually take time away from it. And it should be information. It shouldn't be a lot of data. Data needs, like a smartphone, a lot of people have it. A smartphone is really as smart as the person using it, because it's a great aggregator of all the data that you want, but it doesn't always provide you a lot of information. Like Google Now, for instance, the reason why that thing is so popular, that application is popular and people like it, is because it presents you information automatically analyzing the data that you have, and automatically you are not asking for it. It is telling you that relevant pieces of information based on the context which you are there. And that's really, really powerful. That's an intelligent application. That's what intelligence is about, because you're getting information rather than just a bunch of random data which you have to relate and then make the best use of it. The wearable space is something that works very similar to this model. You want to get relevant information at that point of time which really matters to you. You're going to go out, you want to see if it's going to rain. You have a meeting and you're about to go out for the meeting. You want to know whether you want to pick up an umbrella or not. Or what is the traffic situation like? You want that sort of information, but you don't want to pull out and kind of go through 5 applications, get all the data, understand. Things like this is what the wearables space is going to be like. What is Android Wear? This is specifically what I've talked about so far was just wearables. What is Android Wear basically? It's a platform, an open software platform for wearables. And I'm saying like a smartwatch. There could be more things there. Right now we know the form factor smartwatch, which has round and square screens and whatnot. It's really simple UI. These are some of the characteristics that you see. The UI is really simple. It's contextual. You're not overloading the user with all the data points that you would with a larger screen. You really want to show only the information that's relevant for them. And all the content that you present is optimized for these small screens. So you don't really have to, you think of it kind of differently then. The interface, the current interface in Android, there's a stream of cards. It's a stream of snippets of information that you could use as presented as cards, so that you could quickly swipe them if you don't need it. One quick swipe of the device, that's about it. And it also combines or act upon it basically. You can actually dismiss some message that you got, or you could just reply. Most of the reply is by voice. You're not asking them to type on a smaller form factor. Typing on a 3-inch device, trust me, not going to happen. You're not going to use that because it takes more time out of your life, and it's really hard. Somebody with fingers like mine, yeah, there's only 1 or 2 fingers that fit the screen, so it doesn't work that way. Again, it combines applications like Google Now. It uses a notification system. It augments to what computing engine you use, which is most probably your phone, where everything is getting aggregated. It notifies you that particular information, and then uses that context relevance of your primary device also, and then shows you information that's relevant for you at this point of time. And there are some applications that you can write for the device and then run, because the device is the best place for collecting that information rather than your phone. So you can actually run applications on the wearable device and present information to you, or pick up information from connected devices like the phone or a tablet, for example, and then pull information from Google Now, combine it with other things. And also you can write applications with present information to the user. So that's where the power of the ecosystem comes into play. The ecosystem can write applications which, like Google Now, presents information back to the user. So feel free to stop me in between. I'm going to run through the slides. Feel free to stop me in between if there are questions. Do you have one?
Give an example as to how people affect themselves.
Yeah. That's something I've noticed.
Correct. I'm just keeping that as an add-on here. So that's about distraction. Right? So you very well look for the space and the behavior.
Okay.
So what is the behavior change? You're still looking at information. You got perhaps right now the phone
So, so the question is more like, is this distracting you a lot more now?
It's same thing. Behavior is still the same.
Not.
But I know
Repeat the
it's
question.
concise information.
If you could repeat the question for other
Yeah. So the question was that isn't the wearable itself distracting you from your day-to-day life? But the amount of time you spend on the wearable for the same information is kind of very little. So if you, I mean, I am someone who I was something a little skeptical about it. I used a Sony smartwatch before Google Wear and Android Wear came out, and I wasn't somebody who was like really always using all the connected model of it. I was just using it more like a watch at that time. And when people asked me, I said, it's good to tell me time. But that's what I told people at that point of time. But then one thing that really stuck to me when I started using Android Wear was that the amount of time I was spending at a lot of the things that I was responding to or taking actions upon it. A lot of time you just archive your mails. You just get a piece of information, quickly glance into your archive. The amount of time it took was really small. So you're not getting, and other factors, you're not really getting lost in that linked model of things which you're not necessarily wanting to do at that point of time. So that's where I save time. And I think a lot of users have commented on the same factor that there's a lot of time saved because you're not getting lost in the phone mode. So that's where I think it is. And the distraction part of it is you can action on it, you can leave it as your phone could, but the action is immediate. In a phone, you're taking it, you're spending more time on the device to kind of get to that point. You're dismissing the notification itself.
Okay, so all of this is a read-only sort of a interface. Right?
So not exactly. You can action on it. So like if I get an SMS, I can read the SMS, but I can also respond back. I can just say reply, talk to it. You don't type it in. So you don't type it in. No, you talk to it. So the voice-enabled interface is what most of this have.
Okay, so that comes to the point where does it work for the Indian accent? And does it even, like, is your voice recognition to a level where it can take in any input without having, avoiding the noise around?
It does do that pretty well. That's what I have actually seen. It does that pretty well. It has no trouble when I'm dictating. So it goes in a dictation model. It's not like you, and it has right to you, and then take and action. It doesn't work like that. You just say, you just need to take an action. You just dictate your text. It does confirm what it is, then give you a time to accept or reject that if it is not the right thing. So the way I see it is, it does help, and I've never faced a problem of it never being able to understand. I use it in car sometimes to respond back very quickly, and I haven't had a problem with that. The engines have actually improved quite a lot over the period of time. From where voice was released first to what it is right now, the engines have really improved. So that's something you can take advantage of. Yeah.
I have
Sure.
So, a couple of questions actually. So, one of them is regarding the localization. You've seen this working, say, in the region. So, in the current context, what happens is even though we use English as a script, many times we tend to respond it in a local language. I mean, you get my point. So, basically, we type in English, but the words are actually in a regional language.
Okay.
So, do you think this use case will work there? That's the first question. And the second question is picking on from what Jayant was talking some time ago about, would people be comfortable talking into their phone, responding to messages? So imagine the same example that you say, three people come into the lift and they're talking into their phone or responding a message. So is there any use case driven or research done on the people's behavior into that sort of use case?
So first question, I don't think that use case really works well here. It's not something, because the speech engine kind of recognizes your voice and converts it to English, so that's what it's actually trying to do. And if you're trying another language, then sometimes it might not do that really well. It's trying to match it to the best English word that you're trying to do. So that point is what I take for that first one. For the second one, see, not everybody wants to respond. How many times do you respond to every message that you get? But if you look at it from a larger perspective, you respond to maybe a fraction of the messages that you would get. Most of the time your action is to archive it or maybe mark it for later to action or things like that. Those sort of use cases kind of outweigh the kind of effort that you are actually spending on this. Not everybody would be comfortable talking. Sometimes, yes, I might not speak out everything, but it's a quick way of doing it. When I'm driving, rather than taking the phone out and typing everything, it's quickly like, tap, talk, over. So it has its places where it works really, really well, and the convenience it brings about kind of outweighs the negativity that is around there. And there are certain messages that you don't want to shout out loud, so you still want to pick up your device and type it. That's where you have to think about it. Little broadly, it's not going to replace how you use a phone, but it's going to augment how you would use a phone. That's the way you should think about it. This is a standard interface for Android, and when Android Wear was thought about, this wasn't what they did. They didn't kind of make a miniaturization of the existing interface that you run on a large screen device or a phone or anything larger. Instead, this is how it was thought of. Simple, clear. Oops. That was not intentional. Let me just get back to the slide. Yeah. So it was simple. You can talk to the Wear, so you can ask it to take actions. Take a note. What's the weather like today? Things like that. Quickly, you can actually do that. So you can talk, interact with your device. You can take actions very quickly. So that's how it was thought. You can swipe out, like an action would be swipe out, or take a note, or go into whatever, send an email. You can actually have actions written. Even your custom applications can actually, or your application can actually add actions to these menus. By default, they come with a set of actions that people commonly use. The wearable will also get information back to you. It doesn't mean that it's going to shout it out loud, but it's actually going to talk back to you, which means it's going to find information which is relevant to you and then present it to you automatically. It's not like a phone where you're actually, it is not always that you go to the device, ask for information. It kind of presents contextually relevant information for you. And if you think that on the first time it says, okay, I've shown you this, and you think that's something you don't want to go back again, you can tell that this is something I don't want to be notified again for. Yeah. So again, it's context specific. Where you are, what you're doing matters for what information is kind of presented as a screen. I'm going to quickly run through this so that we have enough time for the rest of the class. There are two types of it. One, you can think of it as notifications from other devices collected and presented to you. Second one is that you can run apps on the device itself. Something like a fitness tracker would be a pretty good use case for you to have it on the watch, but something like a mail client is something that you want to have on the phone and then get notified. So you want to augment onto that. And if you look at notifications, for example, a notification like this on your phone, an application, like if you guys have applications and that throws out notification, for it to come like this on your device, there's absolutely no like code required. It just works seamlessly today. So if you take a phone, it has a notification, you have an app which throws out notification. If you want that to be on Wear, you just don't have to write any code, and that's how simple the system is actually now. So to leverage the power of wearables in your applications, it's kind of really straightforward to do that. This is an example of how actions can be done. And again, to do that on the wearables, no additional piece of code required. Your application will automatically, if they are presenting actions on the notification bar, then this is going to be automatic. They're going to present these actions in the right order or in the right context to the user without any additional code required. So the wearables does augment without you having the ecosystem to move further, write code for it and things like that. These are three ways in which we have information being laid out, stacks, pages, and this is how replies come in. So basically different ways in which information gets shown to you. Let me just quickly. So one of the things that we did when we did this was that the information between the Wear and the device is basically done using Google Play services. It's not baked into the OS, because in that way we are able to release out new features to the Play, and that will allow us to quickly iterate over features and quickly roll it out to the market without having the next version of the device to come out, or the next firmware of the device to actually come out. Last four slides, so I'm not going to take more than a minute here. How to think for it. First of all, think of it as an extension to your current ecosystem. Don't think of it as a completely different use case, unless and until you are actually trying to run it on the device where you have to do a lot more thinking. It is always, in most cases, going to be an extension to what your current computing ecosystem is like, how you're consuming information. This is a better way of consuming that information. That's the way you should think. A faster way of communicating that information. Second is, this has to be for quick consumption. This is not for, these are two Wear interfaces that I've shown. One has 6 points of information, the other has 3, but conveys the same amount of data to the user. The user is able to understand. If you read both of them, you understand that the second one conveys the same amount of information to you. What you really want to know is there. So think of it for quick consumption rather than for extensive details in the system. So the more details you have, the more time the person will have to spend on that interface. So think of it in this manner. Present information automatically to the user and delight them. Don't wait for the user to think, oh, I need to go to this application, find this. It presents information back. So when you're actually building applications, you need to think of presenting information back to the user automatically, because that kind of delights the user. He's not asked for that particular information, but still, you're actually presenting it properly to the user. And don't overdo this. That will irritate the user. I mean, I've seen that happen too many times, too many apps throwing out too many notifications. People just saying, I don't want any notifications from this app anymore. And some important notification gets missed. So don't overdo this. This has to be a balance. And show information that's contextually relevant. You're walking down the street, you're looking for the next way, and the watch tells you exactly where you need to take the next turn. Information that's contextually relevant for the user. Don't just throw random pieces of information out there. When the device throws you contextually relevant pieces of information, that's when you actually use that a lot more, gain the most out of that, and allow users to take actions. Because it's not only about presenting information, a lot of these times information has to be actioned upon, and users really need to be able to take that quick actions, like archiving a mail. Not at the end of the day going through an entire list of 500 mails and clicking each of them and archiving it. If you're getting it and be able to archive or reply to it at that instant, you're making it much easier for the user to work with. With that, I'll conclude. These are some of the slides for it. I'll share the deck. Basically, how to get started. This is more for your development teams. Okay, rather, I would say that design and the development part of it. We clearly explained. We have huge amount of resources for them. You can look through that. And by the time the next device is being set up, I can take some questions if you have. Yeah, that's it for me. Can you set up?
I just want to understand, how does it play with the Google Glass? Like, does that still work on the...
Google Glass is another wearable. So you look at it like another wearable.
So does it work with Android Wear, or you have a separate ecosystem for that?
So it doesn't run, okay, that's a... Can I take that offline? I can explain. It's a longer conversation as well.
So, how is it going to communicate with the external world? Does it use Wi-Fi or 3G?
It uses Bluetooth LE. That's how it's communicating to your phones or any computing device that you're using. It's using Bluetooth LE to do that. So that way it's able to save battery. One of the things that we will have as a problem is battery consumption. So if you're running too many things, then battery will be a concern. So Bluetooth LE is pretty much okay.
It always needs a phone?
It needs a phone to get a lot of these information unless and until there are apps running on it. It kind of augments onto, say, it doesn't run a mail client, so it can't get it. It doesn't connect to your internet directly. It connects through your phone's internet. So that's how it works. It's always augmenting. So I'll take another question and then maybe you want to...
Further extension to the same question, when is Google Glass coming to India, and if we need to build our app to run on that, whom do we talk to?
I'll take that offline.
So what
basically, I don't have a timeline to give you, but about the resources that we have, that I can share with you.
So even if it's not coming to India, we still want to integrate our application with that, because we are in the global market. So we just want to get some inputs on that.
Sure, we'll do that offline.
So
I think I'll be offline, otherwise we're really going to run out of time. I know there are questions. I'll catch up with you guys at the end of it. I'll take the last question from here, and I'll catch up with you guys at the end of it.
Hi, this is Umakant. Just quickly wanted to ask you actually that where do you see VR, Android VR actually making a presence in terms of geography? Do you think countries in Asia Pacific will actually pick this up more than countries in US or Europe?
I think the adoption is kind of universally well right now. I don't have exact numbers on it, to be very honest. But it's always out of stock when we are looking for it to buy in bulk for in the store. So people are actually interested in it, and it's a technology that grows on you. So some part of it is like when you use it, you start really finding your use cases and finding how effective it is for your life. So it's not like a phone where you buy it and then you know what it will do for you. So this, not that I know of, but I can check for you, get back to you on that. Not that I've seen any papers on that yet.
All right.
Cool. I'll take the rest of the questions offline.